on the council, if I can just take a moment to do that.
Briefly, yes.
So the mayor has made his appointments to this committee, and there are a number of very concerning folks. A couple of them said that FOP was white supremacy, the LMP are evil and the devil, and most concerning, if that weren't concerning enough, is they said police officers aren't entitled to due process. That's the group that some folks would give subpoena power to. So we believe they should have access to subpoena power because we think that enhances the investigation. That's important. Some people think they should have no subpoena power, no access to it. Some people think they should have unfettered and unqualified. We think they should have access to it. We think that improves our community. Our community needs this, we believe. And so we've reached out to a number of people, the FOP, ACLU, Senator McGarvey, and I think we have a compromise that works if the Senate would agree to it. And that is that they still have to go through, the board still has to go through the committee. The committee would subpoena just like
Metro Council Committee.
Metro Council Committee. Thank you, Representative. And then the documents that the committee gets back, they would then forward on to the board. Whereas before we said it was a May. I think it was not our intent to have it a May. So that whatever documents they get, remember they've already vetted it, make sure the subpoena is appropriate. The elected body has. Whatever they receive, they give to the Inspector General, who has professional. He's got a professional background in investigation in this area, or he or she. So those documents would then be forwarded on. I think we've reached an agreement. I guess Senator McGarvey can talk about his understanding of that, and we also would say, because we never intended it not to be able to go after documents that third parties have. Somebody brought up tasers yesterday. When you subpoena something, it's in the custody or control. They certainly would have the control of it. So that was already covered. We thought we want to make it explicit. So with those two changes, FOP agrees with it. I think Senator McGarvey, he can speak for himself. I think he agrees with it, and the ACLU agrees with it. So I think we've reached a good resolution there. I also want to say, if I can, real quickly, because I want to correct the record on something the mayor said this morning. He's taken shots at us because we don't agree with, and even if Jerry and I, Representative Miller and I did, we couldn't get it past the House anyway. We won't agree with direct access to subpoena for this board, even if the Senate does, and I don't know what the Senate's position is. The House couldn't pass it. So the mayor has said he thinks it should be there. I'm going to tell the truth, just straight up. A senator and I met with the mayor's top 2 people this past summer. She gave us the mayor's top 10 list. On that list was direct subpoena power. But listen to me closely here. I'll take a lie detector test. Both of those ladies told me, and this senator, this is on our list, but the mayor doesn't want it. It's bad policy. And I said, so the mayor's got something on his list that he doesn't want, and he's putting it on us. She said, you can characterize it however you want, but he's going to request direct subpoena power, but he doesn't want it. It's bad policy. I'll put my hand on a stack of Bibles, they said that, and I'll take a lie detector test. Now he's out in the media saying he wants direct subpoena power. That's not what he told me, his people's top 2 officials, and that's not what he told a leader of the Senate. I wanted to make that clear, and I hope the people of Louisville are listening, that he's telling you one thing and telling the legislative leaders from Louisville another.
Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, he's also given the impression that we won't negotiate. I have not spoken with the mayor. Mayor's not reached out to me. His deputy mayor, the last contact I had with her was a text in January. Since the middle of the session, I've had no contact with them except through their general counsel, and I have responded favorably to some of the changes they requested. So I did not, when I started this process, I didn't even know about the CRAB. I had a core of a bill which I want passed because that's important for Louisville. We added the CRAB because we knew that subpoena power, access to subpoena power, was important to them. We knew they couldn't get direct subpoena power. I offered an avenue that was what they needed, but not what they wanted.
Right. So is the core of the bill that you initially brought what we had before us now in the PSS 10?
Essentially it is. Although the last
subpoena power,
yes,
which
right.
we would like to reinsert if the Senate would agree with that.
Right.
Well, currently, right now, what we have in front of us is not the subpoena power. We just have the stripped down Louisville bill that you initially started with.
Correct.
Are there any questions from committee right now? We have 2 or 3 people online that might need to speak just real quick. Senator Thayer.
I see the language term limiting future mayors to 2 terms is still in the sub. And you would know, Representative Miller, because you used to be on Metro Council, is there an impeachment process for Metro Council to consider to remove the mayor?
There is a process that was set up in 67C almost 20 years ago. However, the way it's worded, it's not called impeachment, it's called a charging committee. There are 10 councilmen out of the 26 councilmen have to be on that charging committee if it's a mayor. But those people don't get to vote, yet you still have to get 2/3 majority, which is 17 plus. So it's mathematically impossible to impeach a mayor, no matter how feckless.
Well, this one's pretty feckless. I believe his approval rating at one point was 12%, and I'm not sure who those 12% were. What a tremendous lack of leadership out of that office over the last year. I'm wondering if this is something we should look at in the Metro Charter going forward. Not in this bill, not enough time, not even sure I'm going to vote for it, but just want to put that out there today. I mean, the guy came before the Agriculture Committee at what was left of the State Fair in August, completely oblivious to what was going on around him, and talked about what a wonderful food town Louisville was in the middle of the biggest crisis the city's had in 50 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have President James on the line. President James, just a couple minutes, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your time and allowing me to be here. I am just listening to Representatives Nemes and Miller talk about the subpoena power portion and their agreement with Senator McGarvey. If I could ask a question, does that include third party for like telephone records and things like that?
Yes, sir.
He said yes.
It was always our intention to do that, President James. We thought the language was sufficient, but we are willing to tweak that language to make it very, very clear.
All right. Thank you. Senators, Mr. Chair, I would thank both of the representatives for the changes that they have made to the bill. I would still say that there is grave concern on my part and on the council's part with the annexation language that is in this particular bill. The citizens of Jefferson County voted, when they voted for consolidated local government, for annexations to go a particular way, and that the Metro Council would decide on how that would go. The language that's been put in 309 has not been discussed here in Jefferson County amongst the citizens of Jefferson County in any debate. And I'm very concerned about unintended consequences that this annexation language could create without the privilege of having that debate and that discussion amongst our citizens and with the Metro Council members. With that, I will be quiet. Thank you.
Okay, we have, thank you, President James. We also have Kate Miller. Kate, if you have a couple minutes, I know I've skipped over you previously. I apologize for that, but do you have a couple minutes, please?
Thank you so much. My name is Kate Miller. I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Kentucky, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. I just want to keep my remarks very short, but just briefly, we, as you all know, heartily endorse meaningful oversight of all government institutions, all public institutions, but especially law enforcement, because they have such high levels of responsibility. And there are a number of reasons to support oversight, but I want to be clear that the most important reason for us is the ability to hold public institutions accountable, provide space for those who have experienced harm to find redress and relief, and for those who have done harm to make amends, because we all know from personal experience that that is the only authentic way to build trust. And so with that in mind, we ask you to move forward with the proposal to establish a civilian review board that empowers that board with the most robust access to records and witnesses as possible, the most robust access as possible, And with that in mind, there were a couple of examples given, so I'll give a couple myself. When this body, this chamber, discussed civilian review boards last week, there was a hearty discussion on the sexual assault and sexual abuse perpetrated by LMPD officers against Louisville kids through the Explorer program. And as a Louisvillian, I don't have to tell Representative Miller and Representative Nemes that was, as well as Councilman Hollander and James, that was abhorrent to watch unfold, not only because of the abuse, but because of the evidence of cover-up. But that was several years ago. Just this week, there have been two alarming stories on law enforcement officers within the Commonwealth. There was a story from the Herald Leader, I think last week, about an officer who used a racial slur and entered a home, even though he had been denied access to that home by his supervisor for a misdemeanor warrant. He entered the home with guns drawn. That happened in the fall, and he didn't resign until February. Just this week, WDRB reported on a story that a law enforcement officer in Louisville who was tasked as the diversity and inclusion officer for LMPD allegedly experienced discrimination and bias. And so these are the perspectives of the community that are calling out for an opportunity to hold our institutions accountable. And that's why we are asking for the most robust access that you all will permit. And we want to say, hey, look, if this doesn't work and CRB doesn't get the access they need, let's come back in 2022. We'd love to have that sort of commitment to 2022 and say, let's make sure we did this the way that it should be done. And so thank you for the opportunity to testify. Thank you, Representative Nemes and Representative Miller. Thank you, Senator McGarvey. Thank you, everyone, for allowing this space for us to be a part of. And we urge you to pass as robust access to subpoena power as possible. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Councilman Hollander, are you online? Just a couple minutes, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. I have two comments not related to civilian review subpoena. And I would say, Mr. Chair, in response to your question, there are two sections of this bill which were clearly not part of the original legislation. And those are the sections that deal with annexation. The section allowing suburban cities to annex without any approval of Metro Council, which is a direct contravention of what is approved by the voters, was not in the original legislation. It appeared on the House floor. The section that allows new suburban cities to be created was not in the original legislation. It appeared yesterday in the committee substitute. When Louisville voters voted for a merged government, we voted to abolish the city that I lived in, the city of Louisville, to allow suburban cities to continue, but to say that for 12 years they couldn't expand. And when they did want to expand, and they have since then with Metro Council approval, it would take Metro Council approval. That is being stricken from the law that the voters of Jefferson County approved. We also said that having 80 plus suburban cities, we weren't going to allow more. That is also being stricken from the merged government that the voters of Jefferson County approved. There's been no discussion about that in the community, no discussion among the people who supported merger. I've talked to GLI today. They have no position on this because they've never heard about it. They were big supporters of merger. We have talked about annexations at Metro Council in a very bipartisan way, and this has never come up. One of the first things I did on council was to vice chair a committee chaired by a Republican, Kelly Downard, talking about annexations and how we could deal with it. It never came up in that discussion. We just changed our ordinance as to how we would review annexations, and it never came up in that discussion at all. I don't think this is the kind of change that should be made to our merged government that the voters of Jefferson County approved without any discussion in our community. I have one other comment. Page 10 of the bill strikes language of 65.0037. 65.0037 allows the Metro Council to delegate existing subpoena power to the Ethics Commission. I don't understand why we would be doing a bill which would say that our Ethics Commission would no longer have subpoena power. And so I don't know if that's unintended by the sponsors, but that is in this bill. It's on page 10, striking the language 65.0037, and that's exactly what 65.0037 does. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. And one more, Miss Hopkins, if you have a couple minutes here, then we'll return the discussion here to the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Mills. Yes, a couple of comments, and thank you, Councilman Hollander, for making the point about the ethics provision. We have made that point before. Holly Hopkins with the Jefferson County Attorney's Office, Legislative Services Chief, and our office also handles all the litigation for Metro government. With respect to civilian oversight, if I understood correctly from Representative Miller and Representative Nemes, the committee substitute before you, which I have not yet seen, strikes out existing Section 1. However, there's a verbal agreement that will later come to paper that was articulated on the record. Did I understand that correctly?
Ma'am, the only thing in front of us right now is just the committee substitute. There's been testimony that there is an agreement on Civilian Review Board panel, but what we're considering right now is the committee substitute, which takes out Section 1.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So I will direct my comments then to the settlement provisions that I mentioned yesterday. These provisions have been in the bill for some time, and I commented on them before the House committee and have commented on them to other individuals. As written, a committee of Metro Council would be required to approve before making an offer any settlement offer in excess of $1 million. The effect of that language would be likely Metro would lose its insurance coverage. Those of you who are lawyers and deal with litigation know that third-party coverage, you want to access that coverage, you give control of the case to the insurer. Simply put, if the entity with the financial exposure can't control the risk by making the decision, whether and for how much to settle an individual claim, there's little incentive for them to provide that coverage. Insurance contracts require that you give the insurer the control of the case. They need to be the ones to make that decision. The contract requires that they are the ones to make that decision. In addition to our third-party excess coverage in Metro government, we are part of an insurance trust. Several local entities contribute to this trust, and the four largest, which include MSD, TARC, the Housing Authority, and Metro, are the board members that evaluate requests for claims against the trust. Again, the board controls because the board's funds are at risk. The contributors' funds are at risk. If Metro Council then gets to make decisions about what is approved and for what amount, the other contributors to the trust have no incentive to join because they have no control over their funds. This puts insurance coverage for Metro government at great peril. It also creates practical barriers to settling cases. Anybody who's been involved in litigation knows how free-flowing and fast-moving settlement negotiations can be. And to have to go before a public body to get approval before making an offer creates practical barriers to having settlement approved. It becomes even more problematic in the context of court-ordered mediation. You have to be in a room with the powers that be and the authority to do it. This bill constricts that authority, and we think these provisions are very problematic for Metro government. Frankly, the effect would be we would probably wind up having to try every case over $1 million.
Very good. Senator McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Miller and Representative Nemes. The subpoena power is not at issue in this bill, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today. But if it gets back in this bill, this is the type of bill I would love to see go to a conference committee. I think there have been some really good conversations since the committee hearing yesterday. And if this could get to a conference committee, this is the type of thing where maybe we could work something out and get something good for the people of Louisville. So I want to go through the bill that is in front of us today. And you've heard a lot of these points, but I want to give it to you from another Louisville legislator's perspective. This deals with local government, and we are telling local government what they can and cannot do regardless of whether they've asked for it. For instance, the settlement on page 5 of this bill. You just heard Ms. Hopkins go into some detail about this. I want to give you a very real world example of what just happened. The Breonna Taylor case was settled for $12 million, and there was a lot of uproar when that happened. Some people were upset by that amount. Now we see just recently that George Floyd was settled for $27 million. Well, if this bill had been in place, then the mayor, whoever the mayor would have been, couldn't have settled that lawsuit for $12 million. If it had gone to trial and a jury had awarded $25 million, the city's insurance company could have come back and said, we're not on the hook for $25 million. We could have settled it for 12. You guys are the ones that chose not to settle it. And so there really could be some real world ramifications from getting rid of this settlement power from the mayor that have nothing to do with partisan politics whatsoever, just working on how you actually settle cases and run government. I want to talk about the term limits. I think it's long past time we had a conversation about term limits for all offices in this body. But this bill just term limits the mayor. I ask a rhetorical question. Let's say that all of the events of the past year had happened in the mayor's second term. Does anyone think they would have been handled differently? We're limiting one office in one county even further. And by the way, that office is already term limited. But the people of Louisville voted to have that term limit in place for that office when they voted for merger. They knew exactly what they were going to get. They were going to get a mayor for the entire county of Jefferson for 3 terms at a maximum. We're coming back in here because we don't like the decisions of one mayor in 1 year and limiting terms. Maybe it's the right thing to do, but let's have a full-blown discussion about term limits. And I ask you guys, how would you like it if we didn't like something your county judge did and just came into Clark County and said, we're going to limit the term limits of your county judge and your county judge only from state government? Let's have a real conversation about term limits. A lot of us have been pushing for it for a long time. This doesn't get us there. The annexation piece, you heard Councilman Hollander talk about this. And Councilman Hollander, good to see you. I should say he is a constituent, full disclosure. But he's not my councilman, but I'm his senator. And he's right. We haven't talked about this. Could this end up being a good thing? Maybe. But we have no idea the ramifications of what this means long term. What we do know is it does look like it could potentially unwind much of the agreement of merger, where the cities were frozen and the consolidated urban services came in. Again, that's what the voters voted for. If this is something that needs to be done, let's talk about it. We have a state and local government committee that works on these local government issues with the cities impacted by them. I don't want to be completely negative. There is a really good part of this bill, and that is the Metro Council deserves its own legal counsel. I fully support that. But it's mixed in with a bunch of other stuff. And we're not talking about civilian review boards anymore. We are just talking about the substance of a bill which could drastically alter the form of government put in place by the voters of Louisville. And we're doing it on the basically what I call the last day of the regular session before the veto on a committee sub that is the 10th version. And while I'd like to see a lot of this go for a conference committee, I don't think this bill is ready for prime time for the reasons I've laid out for you guys. And of course, the reason I didn't even know about until today, that 65.0037, that we're now taking the subpoena power away from our ethics commission. Something, again, I don't think has been fully fleshed out or maybe was even intended. So I have some problems with this bill, guys, and I ask that you think about your own local communities when you're voting on this bill, and if this is the kind of thing you'd like to see for them.
Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To be fair to my friend Leader McGarvey, Jefferson County and Fayette County both asked for and received a different form of government than 118 other counties. And when you ask the legislature for special dispensation, the legislature has the right to come back and make those changes. Now, I just say that from a general point of view. Doesn't mean I'm going to vote for the bill, doesn't mean I'm going to be against the bill. But this legislature has certain rights to make changes to the form of government that are in Fayette and Jefferson, that are different from all other 118 counties. And so we have the right to make those changes. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Very good. Any other comments from the committee for us? Any other summations from the representatives before us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I'm not sure, but I will check if it does inadvertently remove subpoena power for the Ethics Commission. But believe me, I've been trying since 2016 to get direct subpoena power for the Ethics Commission, and it was Mayor Fisher who blocked that in 2016. We were able to get it in 2017 via the GOAC committee, which is exactly where it should be. So I'd be happy to have a floor amendment to fix that if indeed it needs fixing. Regarding the rest of the comments, settlement agreements are approved by legislative bodies in Kentucky since at least 1917. And I've spoken with city attorneys elsewhere, and this is normal, even if you have a trust. Our county attorney takes a certain position when it's convenient for the mayor, and that's certainly why Metro Council needs its own council. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in 10 seconds, I'd ask for the committee to vote this out of committee, and let's move forward. It's a good bill at its heart. I think it needs to move forward. If we need to make changes, we will throughout the day. All these issues have been in the community for a long time.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Nemes, a second from Senator Wheeler. If there are not any other comments, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Alvarado.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you may.
I'm going to cast an aye vote to get it out of committee. I mean, there's still a lot of discussion around this, obviously a lot of worries. I appreciate the section that was removed. That gave me a lot of angst because I was probably a no on that just based off of that yesterday. So the fact that came out makes me feel better. And I know there's a lot of work. It's out of my district. I know it's an issue that's more of a Jefferson County issue, but I know there's going to be a lot more discussions probably going on today. But I'll cast an aye vote. Thank you.
Senator McDaniel. Senator McGarvey. Senator Nemes.
Aye.
Senator Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, explain my vote.
Yes, you may.
I'm going to cast an aye vote as well to get out of committee. I do, as a person that usually values local control, I say usually because there's always exceptions, but the mayor term limits does bother me. However, Senator Thayer does bring up a good point, but that is an issue that I'm going to continue to look at. So I vote aye today.
Senator Southworth.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This might be the only time you hear me say this session. I'm going to vote yes to get it to committee to move it forward. I think the free conference committee is about our only option here because this thing's been the worst tangle ever. And I could sit here and vote pass. I could vote no. Certainly wouldn't vote a wholehearted yes, but I do think that if we could have the Jefferson County Louisville Metro Caucus get together and tell me what in the world's going on, I would really appreciate one clean version, and then I will vote on it with my eyes and my heart. Thank you.
Senator Storm.
Explain my vote.
Yes, you can.
I'd like to vote aye today to get it out of committee, and I think there's some issues, obviously, that need to be worked through, and I appreciate your ability to work on those issues.
Senator Thayer.
Explain my vote.
Yes, you may.
I'm going to vote aye to get it out of committee, and I rarely do that, but I have a lot of respect for the two men sitting before me. I don't like civilian review panels. I think, as I said yesterday, we have civilian review panels. They are called the elected bodies of government, and they should be the ones dealing with this, not an appointed, unelected board. Also, I'm ambivalent about the term limit piece. I just think we need to give Metro government a better avenue for impeachment to remove for misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance, or however you want to ascribe Mayor Fisher's job performance over the last year or so. On the term limits matter, I'm old enough to remember when they called Jerry Abramson the mayor for life. I mean, he was on Maker's Mark billboards, for heaven's sake. I don't know if this bill is going to come to the floor for a vote, guys, but we'll get it out of committee today. So I vote aye.
Senator Wheeler.
Mr. Chairman, explain my aye vote.
Yes, you may.
Again, I'm going to vote yes to make sure that the conversation is continued. I have great faith in the two people sitting before me, as well as other members of the Louisville legislative delegation. I think that a conference committee where these things get hammered out is the appropriate place for that to happen. So I'm going to vote aye to move it forward.
Senator Mills.
Yes, explain real quick. One of the reasons I put this on the agenda was to give some oxygen to this. I think there's been a lot of work on both sides, and I think we've done that today. So I'm going to vote yes to move it on out of committee. So House Bill 309 with the committee sub 10 passes 9-1, and same shall pass on to the Senate floor. Thank you, gentlemen. If there are not any other items before our committee, we stand adjourned.